Life often tests us in unexpected ways. For Mike Thompson, that test came on an ordinary Tuesday morning when he spotted a stalled ambulance at the intersection outside his repair shop. Inside, a critically ill patient fought for her life while precious minutes ticked away. Without hesitation, Mike abandoned his work, sprinted across the street and did what he did best: fixed engines. His quick thinking got the ambulance moving again, saving a stranger's life. But when he returned to his shop, his boss was waiting with a pink slip. "Left without notice," it read. Now jobless, with a young daughter to support, Mike wondered if doing the right thing had cost him everything. Could this split-second decision to help a stranger actually become the moment that changed his life forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The socket wrench felt heavy in Mike Thompson's hand as morning light filtered through the dusty windows of Thompson's auto repair. It wasn't just any tool. The worn chrome surface and scratched handle told the story of 2 generations of mechanics. His father's initials, JT, were still visible, etched into the metal decades ago. Every morning, Mike ran his thumb over those letters before starting his day, a ritual that connected him to the legacy his father had left behind. The familiar scent of motor oil and coffee mingled in the air as Mike moved through his morning routine. At 45, he'd spent more than 3 decades in this shop, starting as a boy, watching his father work miracles with broken engines. Now the same knowledge flowed through his own hands, though the cars had grown more complex over the years. "Dad!" Sarah's voice echoed through the garage, followed by the sound of her backpack hitting the worn leather couch in the corner. At 12, she was already showing signs of the woman she would become: smart, determined, and carrying herself with the quiet dignity she'd inherited from her mother. "I brought you breakfast." Mike wiped his hands on the red shop rag tucked into his belt and smiled. Sarah held up a slightly squashed brown paper bag, her school uniform already showing signs of the day ahead. These morning visits before school had become their tradition after Angela passed away 3 years ago, a way to keep their small family connected despite the demands of single parenthood. "You're going to be late for school, sweetheart," Mike said, but took the bag anyway. Inside was a slightly mangled peanut butter sandwich. Their finances didn't allow for much more these days. "Mrs. Martinez is giving me a ride today," Sarah explained, settling onto the couch and pulling out her math homework. "I have 20 minutes. Mike watched his daughter work while he ate the sandwich, her pencil moving confidently across the paper. They'd had to tighten their belts since Angela's medical bills had drained their savings, but Sarah never complained. She understood why they'd moved to the smaller apartment, why her new shoes sometimes had to wait an extra month, why her lunch money had to stretch a little further each week. The bell over the shop door chimed, and old Mr. Peterson shuffled in, keys to his '85 Buick dangling from arthritic fingers. "Mike, she's making that noise again." "I'll take a look, Mr. Peterson." Mike reached for his father's socket wrench. Automatically. Some tools just felt right for certain jobs, and this one had never let him or his father down. "Sarah, homework in the office. Mr. Peterson and I need to discuss his lady's ailments." Sarah gathered her books with practiced efficiency, pausing to give Mr. Peterson a quick hug before disappearing into the small office. The old man's eyes crinkled with affection. He'd been bringing his cars to Thompson's since before Sarah was born. "That girl's growing like a weed," Mr. Peterson observed, settling into his usual waiting chair. "Just like her grandmother. God rest her soul. Your father would be proud, Mike, of both of you." Mike nodded, throat tight, as he popped the Buick's hood. His father had taught him more than just mechanics. He'd shown him how to treat people right, how to build trust in a community, how to find dignity in honest work. The socket wrench caught the morning light as Mike began his inspection, its worn surface reflecting decades of service, just like the Thompson name in this town. The morning stretched ahead, filled with the familiar rhythm of machinery and conversation, of careful repairs and grateful customers. It wasn't a wealthy life, but it was an honest one. Mike Thompson might not have much in his bank account, but he had his daughter's love, his father's tools, and the respect of people who knew that when they brought their cars to Thompson's, they'd be treated right. Little did he know that this ordinary Tuesday morning would test everything his father had taught him about doing the right thing, no matter the cost. Steam rose from the chipped ceramic mug on Mike's workbench, the faded "World's Best Dad" lettering barely visible after years of daily use. Sarah had given it to him on Father's Day when she was 7, saving her lunch money for weeks to buy it from the school gift shop. These days, it served as more than just a coffee cup. It was a reminder of why he kept going, even when the bills piled up and the work grew heavy. The morning crowd had begun filtering in, each bringing their own stories along with their automotive troubles. Jenny Martinez's ancient Toyota needed its weekly coaxing to keep running. Mike knew she couldn't afford a new car on a teacher's salary, so he'd been nursing the old sedan along with careful repairs and creative solutions. He'd worked out a system where she could pay in installments, something his father had always done for folks who needed a helping hand. "How's our girl doing in class?" Mike asked as he topped off his coffee, the familiar aroma filling the garage. Jenny smiled, grading papers while she waited. "Sarah's one of my best students. She has a real gift for mathematics. You should consider the advanced placement program for next year." Mike's chest swelled with pride, even as his stomach tightened. Advanced placement meant additional fees, supplies, special calculators. Expenses that would stretch their already thin budget even further. But he'd figure something out. He always did. The morning progressed with its familiar rhythm. Tom Baker's pickup needed new brake pads. Mrs. Wilson's Volvo had a mysterious rattle that turned out to be her grandson's toy car lodged under the seat. And Frank from the diner dropped off his weekly parts order along with a paper bag containing a hot breakfast sandwich, his way of paying back Mike for all the late-night emergency repairs over the years. "You're too kind, Frank," Mike said. But the diner owner waved him off. "Kindness comes back around, Mike. Your daddy taught me that back when I was just starting out and my delivery van broke down. Never forgot how he worked through the night. To get me back on the road wouldn't take a dime extra for the rush job." Mike savored the sandwich during a brief lull, washing it down with coffee from his special mug. The morning sun had risen fully now, streaming through the high windows and highlighting the decades of history written in the worn concrete floor, the tool-lined walls, the faded photographs of cars long since retired. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Hope you ate the sandwich. Don't forget I have band practice after school. Love you." He smiled, typing back a quick reply. His daughter had inherited Angela's musical talent along with her determination. The school band had been another expense they couldn't really afford, but seeing Sarah light up when she played made it worthwhile. The clock on the wall ticked steadily toward noon as Mike finished up the Wilson's Volvo. He was just reaching for his coffee mug when he heard it, the distinct sound of an engine in distress, followed by an unusual silence. Years of experience had taught him to read engines like others read books, and this one was telling a story of serious trouble. Through the open garage door, he could see the traffic light at the intersection, where vehicles were starting to pile up behind what looked like an ambulance. Its emergency lights were on, but the siren was silent. The driver's body language, visible even from this distance, spoke of panic and uncertainty. Mike's hand froze halfway to his coffee mug, his father's voice echoing in his memory. "Son, sometimes life asks you questions you have to answer right then and there. No time to think, no time to weigh the options. That's when your character shows itself." The traffic light changed, but the ambulance didn't move. More cars began to stack up behind it. The driver jumped out, waving apologetically to the growing line of vehicles, then lifted the hood with movements that spoke of desperate helplessness. Mike's eyes fell on his father's portrait hanging near the office door, then shifted to Sarah's mug on his workbench. The next few seconds would reshape his entire world, though he didn't know it yet. All he knew was that somewhere in that ambulance, someone needed help, and he had the skills to provide it. Sometimes life's biggest moments arrive disguised as simple choices. As Mike reached for his toolbox, he had no way of knowing that this ordinary Tuesday was about to become anything but. Mike's boots hit the pavement at a run, his toolbox bouncing against his leg as he crossed the street. The ambulance's hood was up, revealing the modern engine compartment where the paramedic was staring helplessly at the maze of components. Even from a distance, Mike could hear the click-click-click of a dead battery, a sound that had been his constant companion through decades of roadside assists. "Sir, please stay back," the paramedic called out, his young face etched with stress. "We've got a situation here." "I'm Mike Thompson, mechanic from across the street," Mike said, already assessing the situation. "What happened before it died?" The paramedic's shoulders sagged with relief at the word mechanic. "Everything just went dead during transport. We've got a critical patient, Mrs. Reynolds, major cardiac event. We're losing precious time." Through the ambulance's side window, Mike caught a glimpse of another paramedic working steadily over an elderly woman. Medical equipment beeped with urgent rhythm, telling its own story of life hanging in the balance. Mike's hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory taking over as he popped the battery housing. "Your alternator's been overcharging," he explained, eyes scanning the system. "Fried your battery and triggered the vehicle's safety shutdown. You've got maybe 2 minutes of backup power for the medical equipment." His mind was already racing through solutions, calculating risks and possibilities. The paramedic's radio crackled with questions about their status. Mike could hear the growing tension in the dispatcher's voice, the controlled urgency of the hospital staff waiting for their arrival. In the background, horns began to honk as traffic backed up further, adding to the pressure of the moment. "I've got a compatible battery in my shop," Mike said, mind made up. 2 minutes to get it, 3 to swap it in. Any longer and you'll need a full restart of the medical systems. The paramedic glanced back at his patient, then at Mike. "Do it." Mike was already running back to his shop, leaving his toolbox behind. The spare battery was on the back shelf. He'd just received it yesterday for Mrs. Wilson's Volvo, but this need was greater. As he grabbed it, his eyes fell on the employee responsibilities sign his boss had posted last week, with its clear warning about leaving the shop unattended during work hours. No time to think about that now. Back at the ambulance, Mike's hands moved with the swift precision that came from thousands of similar repairs. He talked as he worked, keeping the paramedic informed, while also helping to manage the growing crowd of onlookers. "Disconnecting main power now," he called out. "Medical equipment switching to backup. New battery going in. Securing connections." Each step was a race against time, each movement carefully controlled despite the urgency. One mistake here could mean disaster. The battery housing clicked shut. "Try it now!" The engine turned over instantly, settling into a steady idle. The paramedic's face broke into a relieved smile as the dashboard lit up with healthy readings. "We're back online. Medical system stable." "Get going," Mike said, already securing the hood. "She needs you moving." The paramedic jumped back into the driver's seat, emergency lights painting the scene in rotating red and white. "Thank you. The hospital will—" "Just go!" Mike waved them off, watching as the ambulance pulled away, siren now wailing its urgent message to the traffic ahead. As it disappeared around the corner, he became aware of several people clapping. A small crowd had gathered to watch the drama unfold. But as the adrenaline faded, reality began to sink in. He'd left the shop unattended, used a battery meant for another customer, broken at least 3 workplace policies he could think of offhand. His boss, Dave Morgan, had been looking for reasons to modernize the shop's management for months now, pushing for stricter rules and computerized scheduling. Mike gathered his toolbox and the old battery, nodding quietly to the dispersing onlookers. As he crossed back to the shop, he could see Dave's car pulling into the lot, right on schedule for his daily inspection. The morning sun caught the dead battery in Mike's hands, its corroded terminals, telling the story of one emergency solved, even as another one loomed. Some choices seemed simple in the moment. Help someone in need, just as his father would have done, but life had a way of complicating even the simplest acts of kindness. As Mike walked back into the shop, he couldn't shake the feeling that the real test of his day was just beginning. The shop felt different when Mike stepped back inside, colder somehow, despite the warm spring morning. His eyes fell on the small frame tucked beside his toolbox, a photo of himself, Sarah, and Angela at the beach 3 summers ago, before. The cancer diagnosis changed everything. Angela's smile seemed to reach across time, reminding him of her favorite saying, "Do what's right, and let the chips fall where they may." The chips were about to fall. Dave Morgan's footsteps echoed through the garage, his polished dress shoes incongruous against the oil-stained concrete. At 58, Dave had inherited Thompson's auto repair from Mike's father 2 years ago, after John Thompson's unexpected heart attack. The transition had marked the end of an era, from family business to corporate efficiency. Care to explain why Mrs. Wilson's Volvo is still up on the lift, and why you just gave away her battery? Dave's voice carried that particular tone, a forced calm that preceded his worst decisions. Or why the shop was completely unattended for the past 15 minutes. Mike set his toolbox down carefully, buying time to steady his voice. There was an emergency. An ambulance broke down at the light. An ambulance that wasn't our customer. Dave cut in, pulling out his phone and scrolling through what Mike recognized as the new policy manual. Section 4.3. Employees must not abandon their posts during business hours. All emergency repairs must be cleared through management. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Mike tried to find the right words. Dave, someone could have died. The woman in that ambulance is not our responsibility. Dave's fingers drummed against his phone case. Do you know how much liability you just exposed us to, working on an emergency vehicle without certification, leaving the shop unattended with customer vehicles inside? Through the office window, Mike could see the family photo on his desk. Sarah's first day of middle school, both of them trying to smile through their grief. Angela's absence, a visible weight in their expressions. That smile of Sarah's, brave and determined, was what he worked for every day. "I'll pay for Mrs. Wilson's battery myself," Mike offered, knowing it would strain his already tight budget. "And I can stay late to finish." "This isn't about the battery, Mike." Dave's voice softened slightly, which somehow made it worse. "This is about adapting to change. Your father ran this place like a charity sometimes, and while that worked for him, it's not sustainable. We need procedures, accountability, predictable revenue." Mike's hand found his father's socket wrench. In his pocket, its familiar weight anchoring him. "My father understood that sometimes being part of a community means—" "Your father is gone," Dave said flatly, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket, "and his way of doing business went with him. I've been looking for a way to have this conversation for weeks now. You've resisted every change I've tried to implement, held on to outdated practices, made exceptions to every rule." The envelope felt heavy in Mike's hands. He didn't need to open it to know what it contained, but he did anyway. The pink paper inside was crisp, official, final. Termination of employment stood out in bold letters at the top. 2 weeks severance, Dave continued, his voice professional, distant. "You'll be paid through the end of the month. I need your keys and employee badge before you leave." Mike looked around the shop, at the walls where his father's certificate still hung, at the corner where Sarah did her homework, at the coffee mug she'd given him sitting half full on his workbench. 30 years of his life lived in these walls, from child to man, from son to father. "The customers trust me," Mike said quietly, thinking of Jenny Martinez's Toyota, of old Mr. Peterson's Buick, of all the people who counted on him. "They've known me since I was a kid. They'll adapt." Dave held out his hand for the keys. Business changes. People move on. Mike's fingers traced the worn edges of the family photo in his wallet as he unclipped his keys from his belt. Sarah's school tuition was due next week. The rent was coming up. Angela's medical bills, though partially settled, still arrived monthly with their reminder of debt. "Can I—" his voice caught. "Can I at least finish Mrs. Wilson's car? The new mechanic starts tomorrow. He's certified in modern systems, understands proper procedures." Dave's hand remained extended, waiting. "It's time, Mike." The keys made a final hollow sound as they dropped into Dave's palm. Mike gathered his personal tools, the ones that had been his father's, moving slowly, each item weighted with memory. The family photo went into his pocket last, Angela's, words echoing in his mind. "Do what's right and let the chips fall." The chips had fallen. Now he just had to figure out how to tell Sarah. The kitchen table had become command central for Mike's financial struggles, a battlefield of envelopes and payment notices arranged in careful piles. Medical bills marked past due in angry red letters, Sarah's school tuition statement, the rent invoice. Each piece of paper represented a promise he wasn't sure he could keep anymore. The afternoon sun slanted through the small apartment window, casting long shadows across the bills. Mike had spent 3 hours after leaving the shop just driving, around, unable to face coming home early. Now, at the usual time, he sat trying to make numbers add up differently than they had the last dozen times he'd calculated them. 2 weeks' severance wouldn't stretch far. The emergency fund, depleted by Angela's final treatments, held barely enough for 1 month's rent. Mike's fingers traced the edge of a medical bill, remembering Angela's insistence that they fight the cancer with everything they had. "Sarah needs her mother," she'd said. Now those choices were coming due, in more ways than one. The apartment door opened with its familiar squeak. "Dad, why's your truck here already?" Mike looked up to see Sarah in the doorway, her band uniform wrinkled from practice, flute case clutched tight. Her eyes moved from his face to the papers spread across the table, reading the situation with a perception that made his heart ache. "Come sit down, sweetheart." He pushed aside the bills, making space for her. "Something happened at work today." Sarah slid into the chair across from him, her expression too serious for 12. "Is it because of the ambulance? Mrs. Martinez told me you helped save someone's life." News traveled fast in their small town. Mike managed a weak smile. "Word gets around, huh? Everyone at school was talking about it. Tommy's mom said she saw the whole thing." Sarah's voice held a mix of pride and uncertainty. "You did the right thing, didn't you?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "Yeah, baby, I did, but sometimes doing the right thing comes with consequences. Mr. Morgan, he let me go today." Sarah's face went through a rapid series of emotions, confusion, anger, fear, before settling into something that looked far too much like her mother's determination. "But that's not fair. You helped someone. Life isn't always fair," Mike said quietly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "But we're going to be okay. I'll find another job." "Can't you fight it? Tell someone?" Mike shook his head. "Montana's an at-will employment state, sweetheart. Mr. Morgan doesn't need a reason to let me go." The terminology felt bitter in his mouth, legal terms he'd learned during Angela's illness, when they'd had to fight the insurance company. Sarah's eyes fell to the bills on the table. "What about my school? And Mum's bills?" "Hey, look at me." Mike squeezed her hand. "You let me worry about that stuff. Your job is to keep getting those good grades and playing that flute of yours. Deal?" She nodded, but her free hand moved to finger the worn edge of her band uniform. "Maybe I could take a break from band, just until—" "No." Mike's voice was firm. "Your mother loved music more than anything. She'd want you to keep playing." The mention of Angela brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She brushed them away quickly, trying to be strong. "I could get a paper route or something. Tommy's brother does it, and he's only 14. Mike stood up and walked around the table, pulling her into a hug. She smelled of brass polish and the school cafeteria's pizza day. "You're something else, you know that? But no paper routes. We're going to figure this out." Sarah's arms tightened around him. "Promise?" The bills seemed to stare at him from the table, their deadlines unmoved by promises or good intentions. The severance check would cover next month's rent, maybe part of the tuition. After that, he pushed the thought away, holding his daughter closer. "Tell you what," he said, forcing lightness into his voice. "How about breakfast for dinner? We've got eggs, and I think there's still some bacon in the freezer." Sarah pulled back, studying his face with eyes too wise for her age. "Dad, we're really going to be okay, aren't we?" Through the kitchen window, Mike could see the sun setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of promise and warning. Somewhere in town, an ambulance was back in service, carrying a stranger, whose life he'd helped save. Somewhere his father's spirit watched over them, perhaps understanding better than Mike why things had to happen this way. "Yeah, baby," he said softly, believing it because he had to. "We're going to be okay." But the stack of bills on the table told a different story, one written in due dates and dollar signs, in promises that were getting harder to keep. The Millbrook Gazette wasn't exactly the New York Times, but in their small Montana town, Carol Weber's weekly column carried weight. Mike stared at the morning paper on his kitchen counter, his coffee growing cold as he read the headline, "Local. Mechanic fired for saving life. Thompson's auto repair faces community backlash." Carol had always had a way with words. The article painted a vivid picture. The disabled ambulance, the critical patient, the split-second decision that saved a life and cost a job. She'd even dug up quotes from witnesses, including Jenny Martinez, who'd been waiting for her Toyota at the time. "Mike Thompson represents the best of what Millbrook stands for," Jenny was quoted saying. "His father built that shop on community values, and now we're watching those values get tossed aside for corporate policies." The phone had been ringing since 7 a.m. Mike let it go to voicemail, not ready to face the wave of sympathy and outrage. The last message had been from old Mr. Peterson, his voice cracking with emotion as he declared he'd never set foot in Thompson's again. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Mike opened it to find Mrs. Martinez standing there, still in her teaching clothes holding a casserole dish. "Before you say anything," she said, pushing past him into the kitchen, "this isn't charity. This is what neighbors do." She set the dish down and turned to face him, her expression fierce. "Have you seen the paper?" Mike gestured to the counter. "Carol's being dramatic. It's just business." "Business?" Mrs. Martinez's eyes flashed. "My father ran the hardware store for 40 years. That was business. This is wrong, Mike. The whole town's talking about it. Dave Morgan's phone's been ringing off the hook with people canceling appointments." Mike sank into a kitchen chair, rubbing his temples. "That's not what I wanted. The shop still employs good people. Good people who aren't you." Mrs. Martinez started opening cabinets, locating plates with the familiarity of someone who'd helped after Angela's funeral. "Sarah told me they're bringing in someone new, some certified specialist who probably can't tell a carburetor from a coffee maker." The smell of home-cooked food filled the kitchen, making Mike realize he hadn't eaten since yesterday's eggs. "I appreciate everyone's support, but nothing." She set a plate in front of him. "Eat. Then we're going to talk about your options. The school board's maintenance position is still open. Benefits aren't great, but it's something." Mike picked up his fork, more to please her than from appetite. "I can't ask people to boycott the shop. John Thompson built that business to serve this community. Nobody's asking anything. People make their own choices." She settled across from him, her teacher's expression firmly in place. "Just like you did with that ambulance. Speaking of which, did you hear about the patient?" Mike shook his head. He'd been avoiding news of any kind since yesterday. "Catherine Reynolds." Mrs. Martinez watched his face. "Mean anything to you?" The name tickled something in his memory. "Reynolds. Like the Reynolds Foundation." "The very same. Her family practically built this part of the state. The foundation funds half the charitable works in 3 counties. She paused, letting that sink in. "And thanks to you, she made it to the hospital in time." Mike pushed his food around the plate. "I didn't know who was in the ambulance. Wouldn't have mattered if I did." "That's exactly the point." Mrs. Martinez's voice softened. "You did it because it was right. not because it was profitable or politically smart. That's why people are angry, Mike. Dave Morgan just showed everyone that doing the right thing doesn't matter anymore. The newspaper sat between them on the table, Carol's words seeming to leap off the page. In an era where corporate policies increasingly override human judgment, we must ask ourselves, what kind of community do we want to be? Another knock at the door interrupted them. This time, it was Frank from the diner holding a paper bag that smelled of fresh coffee and breakfast sandwiches. "Don't start," he said before Mike could protest. "My delivery van still runs because of you. Besides," he nodded toward the newspaper, "you're going to need your strength. Half the town's planning to show up at Morgan's office this afternoon." Mike stood up. "Frank, you can't." "Already happening, son. Carol's article hit social media an hour ago. Your father had friends in every business in this valley, and they haven't forgotten what the Thompson name stands for." Mrs. Martinez squeezed Mike's shoulder as she stood to leave. "Sometimes doing the right thing has consequences, but sometimes," she smiled, "those consequences aren't what we expect." The Morning Sun caught the newspaper's headline, and Mike thought about Sarah, about his father's legacy, about a community that remembered what it meant to take care of its own. The phone rang again, and this time he reached for it. Catherine Reynolds stared at the plastic hospital bracelet encircling her wrist, its printed text swimming in and out of focus. Reynolds, Catherine M., cardiac unit. Such a simple thing, this white strip of plastic, yet it represented the thinnest of lines between life and death. Her manicured fingernail traced the printed date, 2 days ago, though she'd only regained consciousness yesterday afternoon. The private room at St. Vincent's was filled with flowers, their perfume mixing with the antiseptic hospital air. Cards from Montana's political and business elite crowded every surface, their messages blurring into a sea of well-wishes and carefully crafted concern. But it was the local newspaper spread across her lap that held her attention. "I want to meet him," she said, her voice still rough from the intubation. Her personal assistant, Margaret, looked up from her tablet. At 65, Margaret had been with the Reynolds Foundation longer than some of its board members had been alive. The mechanic, "Catherine, you need to rest. I need to understand." Catherine tapped the newspaper photo. The man in it stood in front of what appeared to be his home, his expression uncomfortable with the attention. His daughter, the article mentioned a 12-year-old named Sarah, was partially visible in the background, watching her father with worried eyes. "The paramedics filled me in," Catherine continued, adjusting her position against the pillows. "About the ambulance, about what he did, about what it cost him." Margaret sighed, recognizing the tone. It was the same one Catherine had used 30 years ago when she'd taken control of her father's foundation and transformed it from a tax write-off into a force for change in Montana. "I'll make some calls." "No." Catherine's fingers touched the hospital bracelet again. "No calls, not yet. Tell me everything you can find out about Mike Thompson first. His history, his family, his situation, everything." Over the next hour, Margaret's efficient voice painted a picture. Third-generation mechanic, widowed father, respected community figure. The story of his wife's battle with cancer emerged through medical bills and newspaper archives. His daughter's academic achievements appeared in school records and local news items. "The shop," Catherine asked. "Thompson's Auto Repair, founded by his grandfather in 1952. Sold to current owner David Morgan 2 years ago after John Thompson's death. Mike Thompson stayed on as head mechanic until—" Margaret gestured to the newspaper. Catherine closed her eyes, remembering fragments from that day. The crushing chest pain in her foundation office. The ambulance ride that had turned desperate when the engine died. The sound of voices, one calm and authoritative, talking about alternators and backup power. The difference between life and death, measured in minutes. "The Foundation's fleet," she said suddenly, opening her eyes. Margaret looked up. "What about it? How many vehicles do we maintain now, for all the outreach programs, medical transport, food delivery?" 73, at last count. We've been having trouble with maintenance since Garcia retired. The new service contract with Mountain Fleet Services isn't working out. They don't understand our scheduling needs and the quality of work. Margaret trailed off, seeing the look in Catherine's eyes. Catherine, you can't be serious. Why not? Catherine shifted forward, energy returning to her voice. We need someone who understands more than just engines. Someone who knows what it means to serve a community. Someone who's proved they can make the right decision under pressure. The board serves at my pleasure, Margaret, and I'm still alive to remind them of that fact, thanks to Mike Thompson. She picked up the newspaper again, studying the photo more carefully. What does his daughter want to be? Margaret consulted her notes. Honor student, plays flute in the school band, science club president. College prospects? With those grades? Excellent. With their current financial situation? Margaret shook her head. The medical bills from his wife's treatment, they're underwater, Catherine. The job loss couldn't have come at a worse time. Catherine touched her hospital bracelet one more time, feeling the pulse beneath it. A pulse that continued to beat because a stranger had chosen to help without counting the cost. Her father had always told her that true character was revealed in split-second decisions. In that frozen moment at a traffic light, Mike Thompson had revealed his. Call the car, she said, reaching for her robe, and get me everything you can. Find about modern fleet management certification programs. Catherine, your doctors will understand that I have work to do. She stood carefully, one hand on the IV pole. Someone just saved my life, Margaret. The least I can do is return the favor. The hospital bracelet caught the morning light. Its simple text a reminder of how quickly life could change. Sometimes those changes came with crushing chest pain and ambulance sirens, and sometimes they came with opportunities to make things right. The black Mercedes seemed out of place on Cedar Street, its polished surface reflecting the modest homes with their small, well-tended yards. Mike was kneeling in his patch of lawn, trying to coax life back into his ancient mower. When the car pulled up, he straightened slowly, wiping his hands on his jeans as a driver emerged to open the rear door. The woman who stepped out wasn't what he expected. Catherine Reynolds stood barely 5 feet tall, her silver hair elegantly styled, but her movement still carried the careful deliberation of recent illness. She withdrew something from her purse as she approached, a business card held between manicured fingers. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice warm but authoritative. "I believe I owe you my life." The business card caught the afternoon sun. Catherine M. Reynolds, Executive Director, Reynolds Foundation. Below that, in smaller text, Building Montana's Future Since 1947. The card's weight and texture spoke of boardrooms and executive decisions, a world away from engine grease and socket wrenches. "Mrs. Reynolds." Mike accepted the card awkwardly, suddenly conscious of the oil under his fingernails. "I just did what needed doing. How are you feeling?" "Better than I would be if that ambulance hadn't started." She glanced at the mower. "Having trouble?" "Nothing serious, just an old friend being stubborn. Like most old friends worth keeping." Her eyes crinkled with understanding. "May we sit? I'm afraid I'm still building back my strength." Mike glanced at his small front porch with its weathered chairs. "It's not exactly the Reynolds building, but you're welcome to—" "It's perfect." She moved toward the porch with measured steps, her driver hovering discreetly nearby. As she settled into one of the chairs, Sarah appeared in the doorway, drawn by the unusual visitor. "Dad?" "Sarah, this is Mrs. Reynolds," Mike said, watching his daughter process the connection. "From the ambulance." Sarah's eyes widened. She'd inherited her mother's social grace, stepping forward with quiet confidence. "I'm glad you're okay." "Mrs. Reynolds, everyone was really worried." "Thank you, dear." Catherine's smile deepened. "I understand you're quite the musician. And a scientist, too." Sarah blushed, shooting a questioning look at her father. Catherine withdrew another business card, offering it to Sarah. "My foundation has a particular interest in young women pursuing STEM fields." "And music?" "Well, that's a personal passion of mine." Mike felt a protective instinct stir. Mrs. Reynolds, if you're here out of some sense of obligation, I'm here because I have a problem, Mr. Thompson. She turned back to him, her expression direct. One that I believe you're uniquely qualified to solve. She nodded to her driver, who retrieved a leather portfolio from the car. The Reynolds Foundation operates 73 vehicles across 3 counties. Medical transport, food delivery, emergency response. Until recently, we had a fleet manager who understood both the mechanical needs and the human element of our operation. Since his retirement, we've been struggling. Mike accepted the portfolio, its leather cool against his calloused hands. Inside lay photographs and specifications of a diverse fleet. Ambulances, delivery vans, mobile medical units. Each vehicle represented a lifeline for someone in need. We need someone who understands more than just engines, Catherine continued. Someone who knows what it means to be part of a community. Someone who makes the right decisions under pressure, regardless of corporate policies. Sarah had gone very still beside him. Mike could feel her tension, her hope, her fear of hope. The position comes with full benefits, Catherine said quietly, including educational support for dependents, and a salary that reflects both the responsibility and the value we place on experience. Mike's fingers found the business card in his pocket, tracing its embossed letters. Why me? You must have dozens of qualified applicants. Qualifications can be earned. Character has to be proven. Catherine's eyes met his. You proved yours at that traffic light, Mr. Thompson. Not by knowing how to fix an alternator, but by choosing to act when action carried a cost. The afternoon sun slanted across the porch, warming the weathered wood. From somewhere down the street came the sound of children playing, lawnmowers humming, the normal rhythm of life on Cedar Street. Mike looked at the portfolio again, seeing not just vehicles, but the people they served, the lives they touched. There would be training involved, Catherine added, certification programs, modern fleet management systems, but I believe you'll find the Foundation's approach to community service familiar. After all, she smiled, we're in the business of doing what needs doing. Sarah's hand slipped into his, squeezing gently. In his pocket, the business card seemed to warm against his fingers, a small rectangle of possibility in a world that had lately felt very short on hope. The Reynolds Foundation ID badge felt foreign against Mike's chest, its plastic surface still glossy and new. Michael Thompson, Fleet Operations Director, read the text beneath his somewhat uncomfortable photo. He'd worn a tie for the picture, his first time doing so since Angela's funeral, and the discomfort showed in his expression. The Foundation's garage complex was nothing like Thompson's auto repair. Clean concrete stretched for what seemed like acres under bright LED lighting, with neat rows of vehicles arranged by function. Medical transport vans gleamed in one section, their white paint immaculate. Mobile food bank trucks stood ready in another, their refrigeration units humming quietly. Emergency response vehicles waited in their own area, fully stocked and fueled. Quite a change from a 3-bay shop, isn't it? Mike turned to find Robert Chen, the retiring fleet manager, watching him with understanding. At 70, Robert had the careful movements of someone who'd spent a lifetime around heavy machinery, but his eyes were sharp behind his glasses. It's overwhelming, Mike admitted, touching the ID badge like a talisman. Robert chuckled. That's what I said 30 years ago. Come on, I'll show you what really matters here. They walked past the pristine vehicles to a door marked Staff Only. Inside, a group of mechanics was gathered around a coffee maker that looked like it had survived several wars. The conversation stopped as they entered, all eyes turning to Mike's new badge. So this is Catherine's miracle mechanic, said a woman in her 50s, her grey hair pulled back in a practical braid. I'm Rita Sandoval, 20 years here, specializing in refrigeration systems. One by one, the others introduced themselves. James Watson, diesel expert. Maria Chen, Robert's daughter and electrical systems specialist. Thomas Running Bear, master fabricator. Each wore their experience with the quiet confidence Mike recognized from his father's generation of craftsmen. "They're the heart of this operation," Robert said quietly. "Not the shiny trucks out there or the fancy computer systems. These people keep hope moving in 3 counties. Mike nodded, understanding. "Like my father always said, machines are simple. It's the people they serve that matter." Rita's expression softened. "John Thompson's boy, I should have known. Your father helped set up our first mobile medical unit back when this was all just Catherine's crazy dream." "He never mentioned it," Mike said, surprised. "That was John," Robert smiled. "Always doing good work, never taking credit." "Speaking of work," he gestured to a whiteboard covered in schedules and maintenance notes. "Ready to see what you're really in for?" The next hours passed in a blur of information. The Foundation's fleet wasn't just about maintaining vehicles. It was about coordinating with medical teams, food bank schedules, emergency services. Each vehicle had its own crucial role, its own demanding schedule. "The software takes care of most of the scheduling," Robert explained, pulling up complex screens on a desktop computer. "But it can't account for everything. Sometimes the food bank needs priority because there's a family waiting for dinner. Sometimes a medical transport can't wait because someone needs dialysis." Mike's hand touched his ID badge again, feeling its weight. "How do you balance it all?" "The same way you knew to help that ambulance." Robert's voice was gentle. "You listen to your gut, use your head, and remember why we're here." A commotion at the door interrupted them. Rita burst in, her usual calm demeanor ruffled. "The refrigeration unit on Food Bank 3 just failed. Full load of perishables headed for the reservation." Mike felt all eyes turn to him, testing the new fleet operations director. His fingers traced the edge of his ID badge as he thought about families waiting for food they desperately needed. This wasn't just about fixing a mechanical problem. It was about keeping a promise to a community. "What's our backup unit status?" he asked, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. "Food Bank 5 is down for scheduled maintenance," Maria answered. "Food Bank 4 is on the other side of the county." Mike's mind raced through options, remembering countless emergency repairs at his father's shop. "Rita, you said you specialize in refrigeration. Can you grab your tools and meet me at Unit 3? James, I saw a parts van in Bay 12. Is it operational?" James nodded. "Fully stocked." "Good. Get it ready to roll. Maria, can you pull up the route details and see if we can arrange any temporary cold storage along the way, just in case?" The team sprang into action, their movements coordinated by years of practice. As Mike hurried toward the disabled food bank truck, he caught Robert nodding in approval. The ID badge bounced slightly against his chest as he walked. No longer feeling quite so foreign. Different building, different scale, but the basics hadn't changed. People needed help, and he knew how to provide it. His father would have understood. Some things were bigger than just fixing engines. The note was waiting on Mike's desk when he arrived Monday morning, typed on plain paper with no signature. "The Foundation isn't a charity case for local mechanics. Some of us earned our positions the traditional way." He stood there, coffee cooling in his father's old thermos, reading the words again as morning sunlight streamed through his office window. 3 weeks into his new role, and the honeymoon period was officially over. The note shouldn't have surprised him. He'd felt the undercurrents of resistance, particularly from the administrative floor above the garage. Marcus Whitmore, the SAYS, Foundation's operations manager, had made his disapproval clear in a dozen subtle ways during staff meetings. "Morning, boss." Rita appeared in his doorway, her coveralls already showing signs of the day's work. She noticed the paper in his hands. "Ah, you got one too?" Mike looked up sharply. "This has happened before. Welcome to corporate politics." Rita settled into the chair across from his desk. "Marcus has been gunning for control of the fleet division since before Robert retired. Had his own candidate lined up, some hotshot, with an MBA and certificates in supply chain management. And instead they got a small-town mechanic," Mike said quietly, folding the note and tucking it into his desk drawer. They got exactly what Catherine wanted. Rita's voice was firm. Yesterday's refrigeration crisis? Marcus's candidate would have called a towing service and rescheduled the delivery. Instead, you had us repair it on site and got those supplies delivered only 2 hours late. Mike's computer pinged with a calendar reminder. Speaking of deliveries, how's the maintenance schedule looking for this week? Rita handed him a tablet showing the digital workflow they'd been implementing. We're adapting to your new system. The teams like having more flexibility to address problems before they become emergencies. The screen showed a complex dance of vehicles and maintenance slots, color-coded by priority and type. Mike had spent his first week just learning the software, then another week figuring out how to make it serve people rather than the other way around. Medical transport is still our priority, he said, scrolling through the schedule, but I want at least one food bank unit available for backup at all times. After last week, a knock interrupted them. Marcus Whitmore stood in the doorway, his tailored suit a stark contrast to Rita's practical workwear. Mike, do you have a moment? The quarterly budget review is coming up and I have some concerns about your operational changes. Rita stood, giving Mike a subtle look of encouragement before leaving. Marcus closed the door behind her, his leather portfolio tucked under one arm. I've been reviewing your first month's numbers. Marcus began, his tone carefully neutral. Your parts inventory is up 15% over projected costs. Yes, Mike agreed, pulling up his own spreadsheet. We're building redundancy into critical systems. It's cheaper than emergency repairs or delivery failures. It's not in line with our lean management initiatives. Marcus placed a glossy report on Mike's desk. The board has certain expectations about efficiency. The board cares about impact, Mike interrupted, surprising himself with his certainty. Let me show you something. He pulled up another screen. This one showing service. Interruption statistics. Last quarter, under the lean system, we had 23 delivery failures. Each one meant someone didn't get their medicine, their food, their ride to dialysis. This month, we've had 3, and 2 of those were weather-related. Marcus frowned at the numbers. The cost per intervention isn't the whole story. Mike stood, gesturing to the garage visible through his office window. Those vehicles aren't just assets on a spreadsheet, Marcus. They're lifelines. When they fail, real people suffer. That's an emotional argument, not a business one. Then let's talk business. Mike pulled out the maintenance logs he'd been building. Every emergency repair costs us triple what preventive maintenance does. Every missed delivery damages our reputation and effectiveness. The Foundation's mission isn't to run lean, it's to serve people reliably. Marcus's expression tightened. Catherine may have given you this position, but she gave me an opportunity to help people. That's what I'm doing. Mike met the other man's gaze steadily. If you want to discuss how to do that more effectively, I'm all ears. But if you're here to argue about parts inventory while people go without medicine or food, you're in the wrong office. A long moment passed. Through the window, they could see Maria Chen teaching a group of tribal youth about basic engine maintenance, part of Mike's new community outreach program. Marcus picked up his portfolio. The budget meeting is Thursday at 10. I expect a full justification for these expenditures. You'll have it, Mike promised, along with the stories of the people those parts helped. After Marcus left, Mike pulled out the anonymous note again. The words still stung, but differently now. He'd earned his position the same way he'd earned everything in his life, by putting people first and letting the results speak for themselves. Outside his office, the garage hummed with purposeful activity, each sound representing someone's need being met, someone's burden being lightened. No amount of anonymous notes could change that reality. The repair log glowed on Mike's computer screen, rows of data telling a story that went far beyond mere maintenance records. He'd spent weeks developing this system, combining old-school mechanical wisdom with modern tracking software. Each entry contained not just what was fixed, but why it mattered. Replace timing belt on medical transport 7. enabled Mrs. Chen to make all dialysis appointments this month. Updated refrigeration unit on FB4 kept 1,000 pounds of fresh produce from spoiling during reservation delivery. It was this log he'd be presenting to the board in 10 minutes. Catherine had stopped by his office earlier, her eyes twinkling, with something that looked like anticipation. "Ready for the budget review?" she'd asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Mike had replied, straightening his tie, a new one Sarah had helped him pick out last weekend. "Just tell them what they need to hear, not what they expect to hear." With that cryptic advice, she'd left him to his preparations. Now, standing outside the boardroom's heavy oak doors, Mike took a deep breath. The repair log was his evidence, his justification, his story to tell. Sarah's words from breakfast echoed in his memory. "Show them what you showed me, Dad, that fixing things isn't just about machines." He pushed open the doors. The boardroom was all polished wood and leather chairs, with massive windows overlooking the Montana landscape. Marcus sat at Catherine's right hand, his expression carefully neutral. Other board members, community leaders, business owners, and foundation veterans filled the remaining seats. "Mr. Thompson," Catherine nodded, "please begin." Mike connected his laptop to the projector, and the repair log filled the screen. "What you're looking at isn't just a maintenance record," he began. "It's a map of our impact in the community." He clicked through to his first example. 2 months ago, under the previous system, this vehicle would have been scheduled for replacement. A photo of Medical Transport 7 appeared. Cost analysis said it was more efficient to buy new than to keep repairing. But here's what the numbers didn't show. Another click revealed a photo of an elderly woman with a warm smile. "This is Margaret Chen, no relation to our Maria, just one of the 1,000 people who depend on our medical transport program. She needs dialysis 3 times a week, lives 30 miles from the nearest center. Our vehicle is her lifeline." Mike scrolled through the repair log. "Instead of replacing the vehicle, we implemented a predictive maintenance program. Costs dropped 60%. More importantly, Mrs. Chen hasn't missed a single appointment." For the next 20 minutes, Mike walked them through case after case where understanding the human story had led to better technical solutions. The tribal youth maintenance training program that had cut repair times in remote areas. The mobile repair unit that kept food bank deliveries on schedule. The new parts inventory system that anticipated needs before they became emergencies. "Yes, our parts inventory is up 15%, he acknowledged, meeting Marcus's gaze. "But our service interruptions are down 80%. Emergency repair costs have dropped by half. And most importantly," he pulled up his final slide, "not a single person has gone without medicine, food, or medical transport due to vehicle failure in the past month." Silence filled the boardroom. Catherine's smile had grown progressively wider during his presentation. Even Marcus looked thoughtful. "The numbers are impressive," one board member said, "but what about sustainability? Can we maintain this level of service?" Mike pulled up one last entry from his repair log. "This is from yesterday. One of our food bank trucks broke down in Wolf Point. Instead of calling a tow and cancelling delivery, our newly trained local maintenance team had it running in an hour. The cost? Parts and labor came to less than a quarter of what we used to spend on towing alone." He closed his laptop. "My father taught me that every repair has 2 parts, fixing what's broken and making sure it stays fixed. That's what we're building here. A sustainable system that serves people first and spreadsheets second." Catherine cleared her throat. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Marcus, I believe you had some concerns about the budget." Marcus shuffled his papers, then set them down. "Actually, I'd like to propose we expand the maintenance training program to the reservations. The cost-benefit analysis, given these numbers, is compelling." The tension in the room dissolved. Board members began asking questions about implementing similar programs in their areas. Through it all, Mike's repair log remained on screen, each entry a testament to the difference between fixing machines and helping people. After the meeting, Catherine caught him in the hallway. "You didn't just show them numbers," she said. "You showed them the heart of what we do." Mike thought about his father's old saying, "A good mechanic fixes more than engines." The repair log had proved it, entry by entry, story by story. Sometimes the best innovations weren't about technology at all. They were about remembering why the work mattered in the first place. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, exactly 3 months after the day Mike had fixed the ambulance. It was handwritten on cream-colored stationery, the kind his mother had always called proper paper. The return address belonged to Peter Reynolds, Catherine's son. "Dear Mr. Thompson, my mother has told me many times about the man who saved her life that morning, but words feel insufficient. I was in London when she had her heart attack, and every day I thank God that you were there when I couldn't be. Because of your split-second decision, I got to hear my mother's voice again, to see her smile, to have more time. I wonder if you know how many lives you touched that day, not just my mother's, but our entire families. And now, through your work at the foundation, countless others. Would you and your daughter consider joining us for dinner this Saturday? There are some people who would very much like to meet you both. With deepest gratitude, Peter Reynolds." Mike read the letter twice, then set it down on his office desk. Through his window, he could see the Foundation's newest ambulance being prepped for service, its white paint gleaming under the morning sun. 3 months felt like a lifetime ago. "Dad!" Sarah stood in his doorway, holding her flute case. The Foundation's after-school program meant she could practice in the empty conference room while waiting for him to finish work. "Are you okay?" He handed her the letter. As she read, he watched her expression shift from curiosity to understanding. "Are we going? Do you want to?" Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing the elegant handwriting. "Mom would want us to." Saturday evening found them pulling up to the Reynolds estate in Mike's newly reliable truck, his first major purchase since starting at the Foundation. Sarah wore the dress she'd worn to her last band concert, and Mike wore his best suit, the one Angela had helped him pick out years ago. Catherine met them at the door herself, looking far stronger than she had during their porch conversation 3 months ago. "Welcome to my home," she said, leading them inside, "though I suspect it will soon feel like a community center." The grand foyer opened into a warm, well-lit living room filled with people. Mike recognized some faces from newspaper photos. Business leaders, community figures, Foundation board members. But it was the other faces that caught his attention. Mrs. Chen, from the dialysis route, smiling from her wheelchair. Tommy Running Bear's grandmother, who received weekly food deliveries on the reservation. Faces that belonged to the names in his repair log, the people whose lives were touched by working vehicles and dedicated drivers. "Surprise," Catherine said softly. They all wanted to meet the man who inspired our new community-first approach to fleet management. Before Mike could respond, a tall man with Catherine's eyes stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Peter Reynolds." His handshake was firm, his eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you for saving my mother." More people came forward. Mrs. Chen spoke about never missing a treatment. Tommy's grandmother told stories of fresh food reaching the reservation, even during storms. Foundation drivers shared tales of improved maintenance and fewer breakdowns. Each story connected back to that morning at the traffic light, that moment of choosing to help. Sarah stayed close to his side, accepting compliments about her musical achievements and academic excellence. Catherine had kept her word about educational support. Sarah's upcoming science camp was already paid for, and college discussions had moved from if to where. "I have something to show you," Catherine said later, leading Mike to a side table. Under glass lay a familiar piece of paper, the pink slip from Thompson's auto repair. Beside it sat his father's worn socket wrench, carefully preserved. "How did you—" "Robert Chen mentioned it was your father's. We thought these belonged together." The end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Catherine touched the glass gently. "Sometimes the best way to honor a legacy is to build on it." Mike stared at the display, remembering the weight of both items in his hands. The socket wrench that had taught him his father's values, the termination. Notice that had tested those values. Now they were artifacts of a larger story. "There's one more thing," Peter said, joining them. He handed Mike another letter, this one sealed with the Foundation's official letterhead. "The board voted yesterday. We're expanding the community fleet program to other counties. We'd like you to oversee the expansion." Mike opened the letter, reading the details through blurring eyes. More vehicles, more communities served, more lives touched, all because of a split-second decision to help a stranger. Across the room, Sarah was deep in conversation with Catherine about the Foundation's Youth STEM program. Her eyes shone with the same light he'd seen in Angela's when she spoke about the future. Sometimes the biggest changes in life came disguised as simple choices: helping a stranger, fixing an engine, choosing to do what's right. The thank you letter in his pocket seemed to warm against his heart, a reminder that every act of kindness created ripples that touched unknown shores. The blueprint spread across Mike's office wall like a vision of the future, its clean lines and careful annotations mapping out more than just fleet improvements. "Community Integration Plan," read the title, with subtitles detailing mobile training, centers, satellite repair stations, and apprenticeship programs. Each element represented a piece of the puzzle he'd been assembling since that first day at the Foundation. "It's ambitious," Marcus said, studying the plans with newfound respect. The past few months had transformed their initial antagonism into a cautious partnership, but the numbers support it. Every community-based repair station has cut response times by 60%. Mike traced the route lines connecting remote communities. "It's not just about response times, it's about empowerment. When people can maintain their own lifelines, everything changes." The door opened, and Maria Chen entered with a tablet displaying the latest training results. "The first class of tribal mechanics graduates next week," she reported, pride evident in her voice. "All 12 passed their certification exams." The news brought a smile to Mike's face. The training program had been his first major initiative, teaching basic maintenance and repair skills to people in underserved communities. What had started as a simple solution to remote breakdown problems had grown into something far more significant. "Tommy Running Bear called," Maria continued. "Their new mobile repair unit handled 3 emergencies this month without having to call for backup. He says his grandmother hasn't missed a single food bank delivery since the program started." Marcus made some notes in his ever-present portfolio. "The board will want to see this. Community-based maintenance is showing better returns than our most optimistic projections." Mike turned to the next section of the blueprint, where detailed drawings showed the design for their new mobile training units, converted buses equipped with tools, diagnostic equipment, and classroom space. The idea had come from watching Sarah study in his office after school, remembering how his own father had taught him by combining theory with hands-on practice. "Catherine's stopping by later," Marcus mentioned. "She's bringing some visitors from the State Healthcare Coalition. They're interested in adapting our model for their rural medical transport program." The blueprint had started as a simple maintenance schedule, but like everything at the Foundation, it had grown to encompass the human element. Each technical improvement was matched with a community component. Every efficiency gain translated into more people served, more lives improved. "Did you see today's paper?" Maria held up her tablet, showing an article about the Foundation's latest initiative. The photo showed one of their mobile training units parked on the reservation. Local youth gathered around an engine display. The headline read, "Reynolds, Foundation revolutionizes rural services through community empowerment." Mike remembered his father's words about teaching fishing rather than giving fish. The blueprint represented that philosophy scaled up, not just fixing vehicles, but teaching communities to maintain their own lifelines. A knock at the door preceded Catherine's entrance. She moved more confidently now, fully recovered from her heart attack. Behind her came several official-looking visitors in business attire. "Mike," she smiled, These are the people I told you about from the Healthcare Coalition. They're very interested in your community integration model. As Mike began explaining the blueprint, he noticed Sarah slipping into the office. She'd started spending more time at the foundation after school, not just practicing her flute, but helping Maria with the youth science program they'd developed alongside the maintenance training. The key, Mike told the visitors, is understanding that every vehicle represents a promise to someone. When we teach communities to maintain their own vehicles, we're really teaching them to keep those promises themselves. The healthcare officials moved closer to the blueprint, asking questions about implementation and costs. Mike watched Sarah, studying the plans from her corner, her expression thoughtful. She'd inherited her mother's analytical mind, along with her compassion. "Dad," she said during a break in the conversation, "what if we added a mobile science lab component to the training units? We could combine STEM education with practical skills." The visitors turned to her with interest, and Mike felt a surge of pride. His daughter wasn't just watching the foundation's work, she was helping shape its future. Catherine caught his eye across the room, her smile knowing. They'd come a long way from that morning at the traffic light. The blueprint on the wall wasn't just a maintenance plan anymore. It was a roadmap to community transformation, one vehicle, one lesson, one life at a time. As the afternoon sun slanted through his office window, Mike added Sarah's suggestion to the blueprint. Sometimes the best innovations came from seeing old problems through new eyes. His father had taught him about engines, but Sarah was teaching him about possibilities. The partnership agreement sat unopened on Catherine's antique desk, its thick envelope bearing the foundation's embossed seal. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the wall-length windows of her office, catching the gold lettering that spelled out Mike's name. "Before you open it," Catherine said, settling into her chair with the grace of someone fully recovered from illness, "I want you to understand what brought us here." Mike sat across from her, acutely aware of his work boots and the lingering trace of engine oil under his fingernails. 6 months had passed since that morning at the traffic light, but sometimes the distance between his old life and new still caught him by surprise. "The foundation is changing," Catherine continued. "What you've built with the fleet program, it's become more than just maintaining vehicles. You've created a model for community empowerment that's drawing attention from across the country." She gestured to a wall of framed newspaper articles. The newest one featured a group of tribal youth graduating from their maintenance program, tools in hand, futures brightening. "When I hired you, some people thought I was just repaying a debt. They didn't understand that what I saw that morning wasn't just mechanical skill. It was vision." Mike thought about the envelope, about what it might contain. "Catherine, I'm just trying to do what makes sense, what my father would have done, just on a larger scale." "Exactly," she smiled. "John Thompson understood something that most business schools never teach, that true service creates ripples we can't predict. When he helped me test our first mobile medical unit 30 years ago, neither of us imagined where it would lead." She pushed the envelope across the desk. "Open it." The partnership agreement was printed on heavy paper, legal language laying out a future Mike had never imagined. As he read, his hands began to shake slightly. "This is, we want you to become a full partner in the foundation." Catherine finished, "with specific oversight of our new community enhancement division. The fleet program would be just the beginning." Mike continued reading, his mind racing. The agreement outlined resources, authority and responsibility far beyond his current role. "But I don't have the educational background for this level of—" "You have something better," Catherine interrupted. "You have proof. Every community where we've implemented your programs has shown remarkable improvements, not just in vehicle maintenance, but in employment, education, and community engagement." She stood, moving to the window. Below, they could see one of the mobile training units preparing for deployment, its fresh paint bearing the foundation's logo alongside the words "Building Community Through Service." The board voted unanimously, she added. Even Marcus championed your appointment. He said something interesting, that you taught him the difference between managing resources and investing in people. Mike thought about Sarah, about how she'd bloomed in these past months, about the pride in her voice when she talked about the foundation's work, about the way she'd started sketching her own ideas for community programs, combining her love of science with her growing understanding of service. There's something else, Catherine said softly. The agreement includes a full college scholarship for Sarah, any school she chooses, when she's ready. Mike's throat tightened. Angela had dreamed of their daughter going to college, had made him promise to find a way. Now here it was, wrapped in an opportunity he'd never dared imagine for himself. Why me? He asked finally, looking up from the agreement. Catherine returned to her desk, picking up a familiar piece of paper, the pink slip from Thompson's auto repair, now framed alongside his father's socket wrench. Because 6 months ago, you proved that doing the right thing matters more than policy or profit. Everything you've built since then has grown from that moment of choice. She sat down again, her expression serious. The foundation needs leadership that understands both practical realities and human possibilities. You've shown us how to bridge that gap. The question is, are you ready to do it on an even larger scale? Mike looked at the partnership agreement. Again, seeing beyond the legal terms to the opportunities it represented, not just for him and Sarah, but for communities like the ones they'd already helped, for people who needed someone to believe in their potential. The sun was setting outside Catherine's window, painting the Montana sky in shades of promise. Somewhere in town, an ambulance rolled smoothly down the street, its maintenance guaranteed by locally trained mechanics. On the reservation, a food bank truck delivered fresh produce, serviced by people who took pride in keeping their community's lifelines running. His father had always said that fixing things was about more than just mechanics. It was about maintaining the connections that kept a community whole. Maybe this was what he'd meant all along. Mike picked up the pen Catherine offered. Where do I sign? The training manual opened to a page that wasn't just about mechanics. Chapter 1, Understanding Why We Serve. Read the heading, followed by Mike's carefully chosen words. Every repair is a promise kept. Every maintenance check is a family supported. Every vehicle we keep running is a lifeline someone depends on. Mike sat in the Foundation's new training center, watching as 20 students, ranging from teenagers to retirees, bent over their copies of the manual. Each represented a different community, a different need, a different story. But they all shared the same look his father had always searched for. The desire to learn not just how to fix things, but why it mattered. Mr. Thompson, a young woman, raised her hand. Lisa Blackfeet from the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. I understand the technical specifications, but I'm curious about this first chapter. Why start with philosophy instead of mechanics? Mike smiled, reminded of his own early questions. Could I tell you a story? When the class nodded, he continued. My father once spent 3 hours teaching me how to properly adjust a carburetor. Not because it was complicated, but because he wanted me to understand what it meant to the farmer who needed his truck for tomorrow's harvest, to the mother who had to get her kids to school, to the elderly couple who depended on their car for doctor's visits. He picked up his own copy of the manual, its pages already worn from frequent use. Technical skills are essential, but understanding why we do this work, that's what turns a good mechanic into someone a community can depend on. The training center hummed with the sound of modern diagnostic equipment, but the walls were lined with photographs, community celebrations, graduation ceremonies, families standing proud next to newly certified mechanics. Among them hung a black and white photo of John Thompson teaching a young Mike how to use that old socket wrench. Sarah slipped into the room, carrying a stack of the science curriculum she'd helped develop. At 14, she'd become an integral part of the program, combining STEM education with practical applications. The students smiled in greeting. Many had children her age who attended her weekend science workshops. Today's lesson is about more than vehicles, Mike continued, walking between the workbenches. It's about building something that lasts. Each of you will return to your communities with these skills. You'll teach others. You'll keep vital services running. But most importantly, you'll understand why every repair, every maintenance check, every vehicle matters. He gestured to the practice engines arranged around the room, each deliberately chosen to match what these students would encounter in their own communities. These aren't just machines. They're someone's dialysis appointment, someone's food delivery, someone's emergency response. The manual contained all the technical information they needed: specifications, procedures, troubleshooting guides. But between the technical passages were stories, real examples of how maintained vehicles had changed lives. Testimonials from communities where local mechanics had made the difference between access and isolation. Mr. Thompson, another hand, went up. James Running Wolf, a grandfather who'd worked on cars all his life but never had formal training. This reminds me of how our elders taught, not just the what, but the why, the connection to community. Mike nodded. That's exactly right. We're not just training mechanics. We're building community leaders. Each of you will become a vital link in your area's support network. Sarah moved among the students, distributing the science materials that would complement their mechanical training. She'd insisted that understanding the principles behind the mechanics would make them better problem solvers. Looking at her now, or confidently explaining molecular concepts to people 3 times her age, Mike felt a familiar tightness in his throat. Angela would have been so proud. The manual's final chapter was titled Passing It On. It wasn't about tools or techniques, but about teaching others, about building a network of knowledge and support that would continue growing long after this class ended. Mike had written it thinking of his father, of all the lessons that went beyond mechanics. Next week, he announced, you'll each start mentoring a younger student from your community, because this program isn't just about what you learn, it's about what you share. The afternoon sun slanted through the training center's windows, catching the chrome of tools and the eager faces of students. In each of them, Mike saw the same spark his father had nurtured in him. The understanding that fixing engines was really about serving people. The manual in his hands represented more than just technical knowledge. It was a bridge between past and future, between individual skills and community needs. Each page carried forward his father's legacy while building something new, a network of service that would keep growing, keep adapting, keep serving. The Foundation Award caught the evening light, its crystal surface reflecting the faces of hundreds gathered in the community center. For outstanding service and community impact, read the engraving, with Mike's name below. But it was the smaller text that meant the most to him, in the spirit of John Thompson's legacy. The celebration marked 1 year since that morning at the traffic light, though it felt like a lifetime ago. The community center buzzed with energy, foundation staff mingling with local residents, program graduates proudly wearing their certification. Pins, families whose lives had been touched by the changes of the past year. Catherine stood at the podium, her voice strong and clear. 1 year ago, a split-second decision changed not just my life, but the lives of countless others. We're here today not just to celebrate Mike Thompson's contributions to the foundation, but to recognize how one act of kindness can transform an entire community. Mike sat between Sarah and Maria Chen, watching as a slideshow played behind. Catherine. Images flashed across the screen. The first class of certified community mechanics graduating. Mobile training units deployed across the state. Young students gathered around science demonstrations. Elderly residents receiving reliable medical transport. In 12 months, Catherine continued, our community-based maintenance program has trained over 200 local mechanics. Emergency response times in rural areas have been cut by 70%. Not a single food bank delivery has been missed due to vehicle failure. But numbers don't tell the whole story. She gestured to the side of the stage, where Mrs. Chen sat in her wheelchair, Tommy Running Bear's grandmother beside her. These are the stories that matter. The dialysis patients who never miss an appointment. The children who never go hungry because food bank trucks always run. The emergency calls that always get answered. Sarah squeezed Mike's hand as Catherine lifted the Crystal Award. But perhaps the most remarkable story is how this program has inspired the next generation. The screen showed Sarah teaching a science class to young students, explaining how engines worked using principles of physics and chemistry. Another image showed her working alongside Maria, developing curriculum that combined technical training with STEM education. Mike Thompson didn't just create a maintenance program, Catherine smiled. He showed us that true service creates ripples we can't predict. His daughter Sarah's STEM initiative is now being adopted by schools across the state. Our mobile training units don't just teach mechanics. They inspire future scientists, engineers, and community leaders. Mike felt his throat tighten as Catherine called him to the stage. Standing at the podium, looking out at the gathered faces, he saw his father's legacy transformed and multiplied. The award felt warm in his hands, like the old socket wrench that had started his journey. My father taught me that fixing things was about more than mechanics, he began. It was about maintaining the connections that keep a community strong. This award belongs to everyone in this room, to every student who took a chance on learning, every community that opened its doors to our program, every person who believed that we could do more together than apart. He glanced at Sarah, seeing Angela's determination shining in her eyes. Someone once told me that doing the right thing has consequences. They were right, but sometimes those consequences are beyond anything we could imagine. The celebration continued into the evening. Mike watched as program graduates shared stories with new students, as foundation staff and community members planned future initiatives. As Sarah explained her latest science program ideas to an attentive group of educators, Marcus approached, holding a tablet with the latest program statistics. The state legislature is interested in funding expansions to other counties, he said. They're calling it the Thompson model of community enhancement. Mike shook his head, still uncomfortable with the recognition. It's not about me. It's about what happens when we trust communities to take care of their own. That's exactly why it works, Catherine said, joining them. She nodded toward where Mrs. Chen was talking, with a group of new medical transport drivers, sharing her perspective as both a patient and program advocate. You didn't just fix vehicles, you fixed the way we think about community service. The award caught the last rays of sunset through the windows, sending prismatic lights across the room. In its crystal faces, Mike could see reflections of the past year, the challenges, the victories, the lives changed. But more importantly, he could see the future taking shape in the conversations around him, in the plans being made, in the connections being forged. His father had taught him that every repair was a promise kept. Looking around the celebration, Mike saw those promises multiplying, extending far beyond anything he could have imagined that morning at the traffic light. The award wasn't just recognition of the past, it was a beacon lighting the way forward. The keys to the new shop lay gleaming on Mike's desk, not yet marked by use or time. Through his office window at the foundation, he could see the building across the street. A perfect fusion of modern facility and old-school service center. Thompson Community Technical Center read the sign, with a Reynolds Foundation partnership beneath. "Ready for the tour?" Sarah asked from the doorway. At 15 now, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew her place in the world. Her school backpack was covered with science club pins and mathematical formulas, a reflection of the path she was forging. Mike picked up the keys, their weight familiar yet different from the old shop keys he'd surrendered that fateful day. "Let's do it." They crossed the street together, where Catherine and a small group waited. The morning sun caught the buildings, Clean lines, large windows, modern equipment visible inside, and something that made Mike's heart catch. His father's original Thompson's Auto Repair sign, restored and mounted beside the entrance. "We found it in storage at the old shop," Catherine explained, watching his expression. "Seemed fitting for it to come home." The keys slid into the lock with satisfying precision. Inside, the facility represented everything they'd learned over the past year. One section housed state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment and repair bays. Another contained classroom space, where Sarah's STEM programs would run alongside technical training. A community meeting room occupied the front, already set up for tomorrow's first class of local students. "It's more than just a repair shop," Mike said, running his hand along a workbench. "It's everything my father dreamed of, everything we've built at the foundation, all in one place." "It's the future," Catherine corrected gently. "The foundation's board has approved funding for 10 more centers like this across the state. Each one will combine vehicle maintenance with community education, technical training with youth programs, the Thompson model going statewide." Sarah was already in the classroom area, arranging the materials for her next science workshop. Through the connecting window, Mike could see the repair bay, where experienced mechanics would soon be mentoring new students. The whole design emphasized connection between people, between skills, between generations. "We've come full circle," Catherine said, touching the old Thompson sign. "From your father teaching you about more than just engines, to you teaching us about more than just maintenance. This center is the blueprint for how we'll serve communities going forward." Mike thought about that morning at the traffic light, about choosing to help without counting the cost, about losing his job and finding a calling, about Sarah blooming into a teacher and leader in her own right, about all the lives touched and changed along the way. "The first class starts tomorrow," he said, more to himself than the others. 20 students, ranging from 16 to 60, each one representing a different part of our community, and each one learning the Thompson way. Catherine smiled. "That every repair is a promise kept, every skill shared is a community strengthened." Through the windows, they could see people already gathering. Curious neighbors, prospective students, familiar faces from the foundation. The center would never be just a building, like the old shop. Like the foundation itself, it would be a place where lives intersected and futures took shape. Sarah returned to his side, her eyes bright, with plans and possibilities. "Dad, I've been thinking about expanding the science program. What if we added a robotics component, mixed traditional mechanics with new technology?" Mike wrapped an arm around her shoulders, feeling the future pulse with potential. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he said softly, "of who you're becoming, of how you're helping others." The keys in his hand caught the morning light, throwing bright reflections across the walls. They represented more than just access to a building. They were a symbol of trust, of legacy, of promise. His father had trusted him with the skills to fix engines. The foundation had trusted him with the resources to fix communities. Now it was his turn to trust the next generation with building something even greater. "Well," Catherine said, checking her watch, "I believe you have a staff meeting to prepare for. First day as director and all." Mike took one last look around the center, at the blend of old and new, at the spaces designed for learning and connection, at Sarah, already deep in discussion with the center's lead instructor about curriculum. Integration. The keys felt right in his hand, like they'd been waiting for this moment. Sometimes the biggest changes in life came disguised as simple choices. A mechanic choosing to help an ambulance. A daughter choosing to carry forward her father's legacy while blazing her own trail. A community choosing to believe in the power of working together. Mike slipped the keys into his pocket, their weight settling next to his father's old socket. Wrench, past and future, perfectly balanced. It was time to get to work.